a devoted fan, and a plugged-in reporter. There is no better way to talk about hoops than that. Mia O'Brien and Mitch Northam have you covered for the W, the NCAA, Unrivaled, and anything else that involves a ball and a backboard. This is the Women's Basketball Podcast.
What is going on, party people? It is almost February, not quite March. This is January, and this is the Women's Basketball Podcast. Thanks for hanging out with us. Mia O'Brien, USA Today's Mitchell Northam. We just put Mitch through the ringer. That is his Pittsburgh Steelers and their head coaching hire prior to coming on the air. And so, Mitch, I will just say that hopefully this next hour is a little more pain-free comparatively to your NFL fandom the last few days.
Yeah, women's basketball has been my escape from all the dumb things that the Steelers are doing.
Speaking of the NFL, a viral video today on Monday, January 26th, as we're recording this podcast, Nick Emmanwori, the Seattle Seahawks safety, during his draft experience prior to being drafted out of South Carolina, got a pep talk, a phone call from one Dawn Staley after he was not selected in the first round, in which Dawn said to him, Nick, it's going to be okay because now you're going to go to a winner and you're going to be able to contribute right away. First, second round pick, it doesn't matter. You watch, you're going to go to a team that's going to compete. And lo and behold, Raven Johnson's boyfriend, Nick Emmanwori, and the Seattle Seahawks are
I didn't know that.
There you go. And
Yeah.
Raven Johnson and the South Carolina Gamecocks split last week in what was described as one of the wackier weeks, I would argue, for any team in the top five in the last few years, Mitch. Final score on Thursday, Oklahoma 94, number 2 South Carolina 82 in overtime. And then on Sunday, the Gamecocks bounced back in a huge way, knocking off previously unbeaten and number 5 Vandy 103-74. Didn't do Mitch any favors in making money with Mitch. More on that later. How would you characterize the week that was for Dawn Staley's Gamecocks?
Do you want to talk about South Carolina first or Oklahoma?
Ooh, good question. Well, tell me this: who is that game more about, in your opinion?
I think that the Oklahoma game was more about Oklahoma.
All right, let's hear why.
And I think it presented even further evidence of the sort of dichotomy that we have with Oklahoma this season, in that they are going to live and die with Aaliyah Chavez. And Aaliyah Chavez has the keys to this team and the keys to this offense, and she has the trust of Jenny Barancek. And when Aaliyah Chavez plays well, they are very tough to beat. And really, like, she doesn't have to even play all that well. I mean, in the game in South Carolina, like, she was awesome, especially in overtime. She scores 15 of their 19 points in OT. I think finishes with 26 points and a season high 8 assists. So I looked this up. When Aaliyah Chavez shoots above 32%, Oklahoma is 12-0 this season. And that includes victories over South Carolina, NC State, and Oklahoma State. When she shoots below 32%, they are 4-4. 3 of those victories are against mid-major opponents. The other one's against Auburn, which just happened on Sunday. And all 4 defeats are in quad 1 games against nationally ranked opponents: UCLA, LSU, Kentucky, and Ole Miss. So, the recipe for stopping Oklahoma is stop Aaliyah Chavez. But the South Carolina learned that's easier said than done. And so I think Oklahoma's success for the rest of the season in the SEC tournament and the NCAA tournament is going to be predicated on how is Aaliyah Chavez playing? Can the opposing defense figure out how to stop her? And if not, they're going to be in good shape.
And if they don't, then we'll see what happens, because in a elimination tournament like the NCAA tournament, all it takes is one of those sub 32% shooting nights for this Oklahoma offense to find itself out of sorts.
This is an Oklahoma team that, like, this is one of those teams where, like, we've seen this a couple times this season, or not this season, over the past couple of years, right? Where we have a freshman superstar that emerges as the bus driver and emerges as, this is her team now, and she has the keys. And I looked this up too. So here's a stat. So Aaliyah Chavez, since 2009, is one of 6 players to average at least 19 points, 4 assists, and 3.5 rebounds per game as a freshman. The other players in that group are Caitlin Clark, Paige Beckers, Kennedy Carter, Elsie Mitchell, and Hannah Hidalgo. I think, yeah, like all those players have this thing in common where like they're all really talented guards who immediately came in and were like, I'm the big dog now. This is my team. Everything runs through me. The coach trusts me. The coach has empowered me. And that's what we're seeing in Oklahoma.
And it's pretty remarkable considering Reagan Beers is still on that roster and was the bus driver for that team last year. It's astounding, but it's a good problem to have if one or both of them are on any given night. And a shout out to Jenny Baranchik, the head coach of the Sooners, for her viral moment in which she said, "We are bleeping back. I love you. I believe in you. We're just bleeping getting started." I'm glad that the cameras were able to capture that on national television, Mitch. Then Oklahoma followed that victory over the Gamecocks with a victory over Auburn, as you alluded to. So they go 2-0 on the week. More on the SEC standings here in just a second. As for South Carolina in this game, look, ultimately, it once again came down to what we've said week in and week out. And that's where we pair it with the Vandy win. And I'm interested to get your thoughts. South Carolina may have the best starting five in the sport. But beyond that, unless you're getting major contributions from Alicia T., our friend from across the pond, who was cleared and is eligible after transferring midseason, you're not getting much production off the bench. And in turn, in a game going up against a team like Oklahoma that has so many weapons, it can really come back to bite you.
Yeah. That game against Oklahoma, I think this was Lulu Kesson who tweeted this out, of the Greenville News. They missed. South Carolina did like half of their layups against Oklahoma. I think they were like 16 of 31 or something. There was just a lack of execution there. And Tanaya Latson didn't play well, and Medina Okot did not play well. And I think you saw in the Vanderbilt game an adjustment, and Dawn Staley decided, you know what? It's time to shake up the starting lineup, which she did. And she moved Medina Okot to the bench. And Medina responded with a really big game. She comes off the bench, plays 20 minutes, and scores 17 points and has 7 rebounds and 5 steals. And I think Dawn said after the game, sometimes players just need a different look at it. And maybe that's what Medina Okot needs. Jeff Walls did this earlier this year with Amari Berry, who started the season starting and has now basically since mid-December been coming off the bench. And you look what she's done, and you look what Louisville has turned into. So I thought that was a good adjustment. And, that game was always going to be a tough game for Vanderbilt, regardless of the win streak and stuff. It's just tough to go into South Carolina and win, especially when, you're a team, Vanderbilt, where for the most part, I know we've talked about Aubrey Galvin and Wenatanda and, Pissot, but it's a team that's Michaela Blake's or bust, right? And so as long as you can kind of contain Michaela Blake's a bit, which I think South Carolina did, holding her to 9 of 24. And by the way, she had 5 turnovers. They were in good shape. And then you got a bounce back game from Tanaya Latson. You got 20 points from Tessa Johnson. You got a good game from Joyce Edwards. Agot McKeer coming into, the starting lineup and playing well. Who else played well off the bench?
Well, as you bring up Tessa Johnson, Mitch, that's the point I was going to make. It certainly helps South Carolina's case, and it's part of why they led this one from wire to wire. When you make 10 of 17 from beyond the arc, 4 for Tessa Johnson, I feel like there is a correlation if you go through some of the Gamecocks' biggest wins during her tenure in Columbia. When she makes 3 or more, I don't have the stat in front of me, and maybe we can look it up later. When she makes 3 or more threes, whether it was the national title game, whether it was the SEC championship game, Texas, like you go down the line, some of the biggest victories for this program over the last few years have come when she is on. And when she is off, again, look at the depth and the lack thereof. And when one of your starting 5, who's a 3-point specialist, let's be real, she can bring the ball up the floor too, and she can put the ball on the floor. But ultimately, that's why she's out there. And if she's not on, then you're basically playing 4-on-5.
Yeah, I think this kind of goes back to like what we've been saying since the summer. And like, this is a different South Carolina team. Like Joyce Edwards is really, really good, but she's not the typical dominant post that we've seen Dawn Staley have in recent years. And this is a team that to be at their best, they need those 3 guards to be playing at their very best. Tessa Johnson, Tanaya Latson, and Raven Johnson. I think Raven has been under the radar, really steady and really consistent and really good all year. And she's kind of been the player who, like, when they get in tight spots, like the Texas game, like, she has been the leader that has stepped up, as you would expect from a fifth-year guard who has played in 4 consecutive Final Fours. Someone like Raven Johnson, she's the one who, made some of those game-winning plays against Texas. They need Tanaya Latson and Tessa Johnson to start playing the way they played against Vanderbilt more consistently, I think. And then if you get 16 from Joyce Edwards, that's great. If you get double digits from Medina Okot, that's great. If you get whatever from someone off the bench, that's also great. But ultimately, to be in position for South Carolina to do what they have been doing, to be SEC champs and to go back to the Final Four, they need those 3 guards playing at a really high level consistently.
From the Southeastern Conference to another team in the top 10, but in the Big Ten. Folks, we've had this little podcast going for about a year and a half now. Thanks for those of you who are just joining us on OG Triangle Media and following, subscribing, liking the program. And 9 times out of 10, I would argue in that 18-month period, Mitch, whenever we discuss the Iowa Hawkeyes, I am the one bringing them to the forefront, given I previously covered Lisa Bluter and Jan Jensen's squad. But you not only had the opportunity to see them in person in College Park in an impressive, we'll get into how impressive it was, overtime win over the Maryland Terrapins. I don't, if you blow a 16-point lead with 5 minutes to go, I don't know how impressive it is, but I digress. This is a young squad that you wrote about, not just because of their success here, their first undefeated 9-0 start in Big Ten play since 1996, something that Lisa Bluter in her 20-plus seasons at the helm of this program was never able to accomplish. Jan Jensen's accomplishing it in year 2 as the head coach. But you also spotlighted Ava Hayden. There's also the Taylor McCabe of it all. I've talked too much. The floor is yours. I am so excited to hear your impressions of a team that, as Jan Jensen told you, doesn't even realize how good they actually are.
Yeah, that was my big takeaway from, our post-game interview there with Jan Jensen. She just kept talking about, like, I need this team. And like, the Maryland game was kind of the epitome of this, right? Like, she wants the team to believe, like, they are good enough to beat Maryland at home by 16 points and hold on to that lead. Now, they didn't, and they had to go to overtime, and Ava Hayden had to hit some clutch free throws and on and on and on, and they end up winning the game, and everything's fine. But, she really believes, like, this team is this good, and she needs the players to start believing that too. And, it was interesting. Ava Hayden gave me, an interesting quote.
She also gave you a high five. Don't bury the lead here.
She did.
She gave you a high five. Yes.
Just about confidence. And I was asking her, because she's one of the most improved players this season, I think, full stop. She's increased her points per game by like 11. She's one of the top in the nation in field goal percentage, I think at like 63% or something like that. 69.4. No, I'm
that
looking
might
at
be
the
a Big
wrong
Ten
number.
play.
62.6, which is 6th nationally. Ava Hayden's field goal percentage, also 13th in effective field goal percentage and 24th in PER. Ava Hayden is someone we did not know about last year, unless you're like a diehard Iowa fan. She didn't start any games. She played less than 10 minutes a night. Now she's Iowa's top scorer, averaging 16.3 points per game, playing well in big games like the win over Maryland, like the win over Ohio State on Sunday. So Iowa, I looked this up, they have 5 quad 1 wins this year. In each of those games, Ava Hayden is averaging 18-8. Good players play well in big games, and Ava Hayden's doing that. But to go back to the confidence thing, she told me, basically, like, she doesn't really do well. I'm not a person where if I hear, hey, be confident, that's not very helpful for me. Seeing that data, that's very helpful. And that's allowed me to be confident. So, I think Iowa is a team that's kind of seeing it, and Jan Jensen hopes that seeing it transitions into believing it. I think top to bottom, like, they are a really good team. I think what's changed for them from last year to this year is, you have this guard that you picked up from Georgia Tech and Chit Chat Wright, who not only is a pretty solid 3-point shooter, but knows where to put the ball in terms of being a passer.
No disrespect to Lucy Olson, by the way, who was
no disrespect.
Brought into the portal, was the second leading scorer in the country, I guess third technically, behind Caitlin and Juju, and comes to Iowa from Villanova on a 1-year exchange, if you want to call it that, for her final season of college ball. Gets drafted into the WNBA, played with the Mystics this summer, but she was a scoring first point guard. And as much as she can facilitate, she couldn't facilitate at the rate we're seeing from Chit Chat Wright. But Chit Chat Wright also has so many other contributors on the floor at her disposal. She's got 4 other shooters at any given time. Plus, when they run those horn sets with Stolke and Hayden, and then allowing Stolke to play the 4 as opposed to the 5, that's gotten her back to the level of play that we saw during those 2 runs to the national title game when she was paired with Monica Sanano.
Yeah, I think, last year, Stolke didn't have that partner in the paint, and Lucy Olson didn't have a target like Ava Hayden. This year, Chit Chat Wright has that. She has these 2 forwards, Hannah Stolke and Ava Hayden, who can finish at the rim with relative ease when they're put in good position to do so. Iowa's 5th nationally this season in assists per game, and they're 6th in assisted shot rate. 69.4% of all of their shots are assisted, which is really, really good. That means this is a team that shares the ball, plays like a team, plays really well. Now, the question is, unfortunately, how are they going to get things done without Taylor McCabe? Because Taylor McCabe, I think, kind of an underrated part of this season for Iowa. She's been a great 3-point shooter for them. Hit a couple against Maryland. I think she's hitting about 3 per game this season or something like that. She's out for the year with this ACL injury that she suffered on Sunday at Ohio State. Iowa announced that today. They were recording on Monday. So that's a bummer. And they need to figure out how to replace Taylor McCabe, not just the offensive production, but she's been a really good defender too.
Yes, probably their best defender. And she also can dish it out. She only had 2 assists in the win over Maryland, and then again, limited minutes against Ohio State because she suffered that injury pretty early. I'm going to Brian Windhorst meme finger you, though, Mitch, with this. The Brian Windhorst fingers. Don't read into that too much, people, how I just said those words in sequence. Addie Deal. Addie Deal, when she was recruited by Iowa, the number 12 recruit in the class, the highest rated recruit to go to Iowa City since Caitlin Clark. She has now won not 1, but 2 Big Ten Freshman of the Week honors. She had a struggling performance in that game you attended in College Park, but against Ohio State, folks, if they get this version of Addie Deal, who, yes, was 1 of 7 from 3, but 8 of 17 from the floor and had 20 points, and that's what I think is a massive development, because those 2 previous career highs she had last week were based off of her 3-point shooting. She had 5 threes last week. I believe that was against Michigan State, whoever that was against. She had 5 threes in that game. Now she is finding a way to contribute offensively without just the 3-point shot. And if we continue to see this development from her, well, yes, it's a massive loss to lose your go-to 3-point shooter in Taylor McCabe. Addie Deal can catch and shoot too. I think she makes her way into the starting lineup without McCabe the rest of the way. And if she continues to develop here in the second half of the season, that is where, yes, I do believe Iowa is right back as a legitimate title contender, even without one of their most veteran players.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me, was it the 2024 run where someone got hurt?
Molly
for Iowa?
Davis. Molly Davis.
Molly Davis. And then it was Sid Falter.
Yes, it was. Well done. Well done.
And, help them, kind of cover up the gaps. Is that what we're thinking about Addie Deal here?
That is very much what we're thinking about. And Sida Falter was a sophomore that season. Addie Deal is just a freshman. And as I have said time and time again on this podcast, there is reason to believe this is the least talented roster that Jan Jensen will have in Iowa City for the next 3 seasons, because they've got a loaded recruiting class coming in next year. One quick note, because we got to keep it moving with this week's starting 5. Really freaky, Mitch. I don't know if you saw this. Not only did Taylor McCabe go down at Carver Hawkeye Arena Sunday afternoon, her sister, who plays at Drake, went down with an ankle injury 3 hours later, 2 hours to the west. Like, really freaky. I haven't seen an update, if there is one, on Peyton McCabe, but obviously thoughts are with that family, because that is just mind-blowing that the 2 sisters, who are 2 years apart, would suffer both gruesome injuries and be carried off the floor each, just a couple hours apart from one another.
Yeah, I haven't seen an update either, but yeah, a bummer of a Sunday for the McCabe family.
Let's keep it moving. Staying in the Big Ten, it was heartbreak times 2 for the USC Trojans, a team that we've discussed on this pod, Mitch. They probably are a year away from being a year away. And I don't really want to say it that way, though, because they will get Juju Watkins back next year. I don't want to say that 2025, 2026 is gravy for Lindsey Gottlieb's squad, but ultimately it is, because you've gotten Jazzy Davidson into the fold. She's going to get acclimated as the quote unquote bus driver this season. Sans Juju Watkins, who comes in next year. Oh, by the way, they will have another number 1 overall recruit coming in 2026, 2027. But they fell to Michigan State on the road 74-68 on Thursday, and then a real tough one, 73-67 to number 7 Michigan on Sunday. I watched that game the entire second half. This was one that the Trojans came back in the third, and it felt like they had momentum. And then lo and behold, the Wolverines slowly are able to creep their way back. Silas Swords is wearing the face mask these days. And honestly, like Silas Swords, but she's got a shield. I feel like there's a joke there. If anyone hasn't used that yet, I will. This Michigan team, they just keep on coming. All 5 starters finished the game in double figures.
Yeah, I'm looking up USC's kind of resume numbers at the moment. So UCLA, their crosstown rival, is 10-1 in quad 1 games. USC is 2-9. So there's your difference between the 2 LA schools this year. The good news for UCLA or USC is, Thursday they're going to have a tough game with Iowa coming into town. We just talked about the Hawkeyes. But then they're going to have a stretch where they're going to play Rutgers, Northwestern, Illinois, Indiana, Wisconsin. And then they still got a game against Penn State later this season. So I think they're going to be able to have some get right moments and kind of stack a couple, Big Ten wins. Like I've seen some things online about like, is USC going to miss the tournament? No, like their metrics are still good enough to do that as long as they win the games that they're supposed to win down the stretch here. I still think ultimately, I think we've talked about this too, that, the short-term prospects for USC are not great. I don't expect them to get to the second weekend of the tournament, but I think in the long term, it will be good for Jazzy Davidson and Kennedy Smith to have had played this season without Juju Watkins. And then next year you get Juju back, you get Sanaya Hall coming in. Is that who I'm thinking of? Is that
yes. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Top prospect, and you're going to have a team next year that is capable of winning the national championship. So long term, USC great. Short term, win the games you're supposed to win, get in the tournament. We'll see what happens.
Hey, now, don't you question Wisconsin and write them off as an easy win, Mitch. They are 5-5 in the Pingleton era. We are living in the Robin Pingleton days up in Madison, Wisconsin. 5-5 in Big Ten play. Don't call it fertile recruiting ground that Iowa just likes to, go in there and poach all of their players. But I digress. Let's get to number 4 in this week's starting 5. Once again, we got NCAA violations. Oh boy, Mitch, what are we working with?
Yes, this came up on my radar today, and I wrote about it over at USA Today. So Tess Heel is a point guard for the Kansas State Wildcats, who have had a weird, inconsistent season, to say the least. They are 11-10, but they have beaten 2 ranked teams in Ole Miss and Texas Tech. And in both of those games, Tess Heel scored a double figures. On Sunday, they lost to Kansas, and Tess Heel did not play. Tess Heel was held out of that game because of an NCAA violation. Because apparently Tess Heel signed a contract with a professional team in Australia last week. And this was made public by the team, the Keilor Thunder of NBL1, which is one of the leagues in Australia. And so this goes out on social media from the team, from the league, from accounts that cover that league. And lo and behold, the NCAA gets wind of this and they say, no. You can't sign a professional contract while you're still participating in college athletics. I talked to a coach who is very familiar with Australian players and the NBL1 and that league and stuff. And they basically told me that, most Australian seniors who are about to exhaust their NCAA eligibility will go play in this league when their season is done. The league starts up in the spring. Usually, those players will quietly agree to verbal agreements with these teams around this time and then officially sign, when the college season ends. That did not happen here. I don't know if Tess Heel got some bad advice.
Yeah.
Or I'm not really sure what went wrong here, but this was like 1000% an unforced error and a mistake and something that should not have happened, essentially, is what I was told. Jeff Mitty seems pretty optimistic that the NCAA is going to reinstate her. He said after the game, we hope for a quick resolution. She made a mistake in regards to the timing of it. We feel good that as soon as she gets through the reinstatement process, we'll have her back. I think it's interesting that this is happening right now in the midst of what is happening in men's college basketball, where you have Baylor, who signed a player who was a first-round NBA draft pick, who the Knicks still have the rights to, and Alabama, who just added a player who has played in the G League to its roster. And the NCAA has thrown up their hands with those two players, but all of a sudden it's a major problem for Tess Heel to sign basically an advanced contract with a team in Australia.
Yeah. They had to show that they still have some power and pick and choose your battles. If you're the NCAA, I'll stop bad-mouthing them now, but it's not a surprise because it's the same NCAA that we saw for years prior to name, image, and likeness going into law, Mitch, in which you'd have players who had a YouTube channel where they streamed video games, or they posted their music from their band, or they sold artwork on Etsy, and they were not allowed to play. But the players that were taking money under the table, no, they're all good. They can continue playing. By the way, Heel is the third leading scorer on the Wildcats, who went 2-1, yes, because they lost to Kansas on Sunday, 83-61. But as you may recall, that narrow 4-point win over previously undefeated Texas Tech last week. They also picked up a dub over Houston last week as well. Final notes in this week's starting five. I'm taking the lead on this one, but something tells me Mitch is quickly going to have the floor. Notre Dame. We're back to you.
Boy.
We're back to you, Notre Dame. It always goes back to Niele Ivey. It always goes back to the roster construction or lack thereof in South Bend this offseason. Final score, Clemson 65, Notre Dame 58. I saw this score come across the timeline, Mitch. I sent it to you because I saw many sports writers and sports reporters saying this is an upset for Sean Poppy and friends, one of the greatest upsets in Clemson Tigers history. And I said to you, is this really an upset when you have a Notre Dame team that is performing at the level that these two podcasters thought they would be up to this point, given the lack of depth on that roster, given the lack of, Division I ACC players on that roster outside of Hannah Hidalgo, who probably is going to win ACC Player of the Year. This all got more interesting, and this is why we had to fit it into this week's starting five, when Hidalgo made some comments post-game, Mitch, that you were quick to tweet about. Not just that, but also this idea of the best player in the conference playing on a team that might miss the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, basically during the post-game press conference, Niele Ivey was talking about how, hey, we need to have, some more fire, and we need to, play with some more urge and all this stuff. And Hannah Hidalgo kind of jumped in and was like, it's not Niele Ivey's responsibility to fix this. It's on the players. And while I find it admirable that Hannah Hidalgo was sticking up for her coach, I don't think that this fire or urgency is the problem. The problem is the talent. And, Hannah Hidalgo did not put this roster together. Niele Ivey did. And if you look at Notre Dame's game logs recently, basically across the whole season, it's apparent that Niele Ivey only has 6 players that she believes can play ACC caliber basketball. And that, as we have been saying since, May, when this roster was put together, that is a failure in roster construction. and roster management. And that's on the head coach. And I've heard all the things about like, oh, well, they didn't have a GM until this date. I don't care. You're Notre Dame. You have a standard. You are one of the blue bloods of women's college basketball. There are lots of women's basketball programs out there that don't have a GM. There are lots that do. You're Notre Dame. You should have had a GM already. Maybe that's on the AD. Maybe that's on Neil Ivey. I don't know. Regardless, it shouldn't hinder you from acquiring talent. I've heard the stuff about, oh, well, you know, it's really hard for Notre Dame to get transfers because of their academic restraints and qualifications and hurdles. Doesn't seem to bother the football team who was in the national championship a year ago and threw a fit when they didn't get into the college football playoff this year. I've heard about how they have a great recruiting class coming in next year. Okay, cool. What about this year, though? Again, you're Notre Dame. You should have a great recruiting class every year, like a UConn, like a Tennessee, who has, you know, amped up the recruiting game under Kim Caldwell. I'm just kind of tired of hearing the excuses when it comes to Notre Dame, and it's all kind of coming to a head now. You know, they're 9th in the ACC standings, and if you look at their resume, it's a little bit more, you know, than USC, who we just talked about. Like, Notre Dame is 30th in the net. They're 35th in WAB. I look at their schedule. They're about to do the road trip to Cal and Stanford, and it's historically been pretty hard for ACC teams to win both of those games out there. I think that Stanford is a team that's going to give them some problems. Then they're going to host Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech's been better lately. They've won a couple in a row. They're going to go to Charlottesville. Virginia is another team fighting for NCAA tournament seeding. They're going to host NC State. NC State is a team that we've talked about who can beat anyone and lose to anyone. So we'll see. Then to round out the regular season, they got Syracuse and Louisville. Syracuse just took UNC to OT on the road. Louisville is Louisville. And, you know, they beat Notre Dame already earlier this season. So Notre Dame is a team that really can't afford to lose any more games that they shouldn't lose. And then moreover, to the other point that I brought up on Twitter was, is Hannah Hidalgo going to still win ACC Player of the Year? I think statistically, obviously, she's putting up great numbers, all-American type numbers. But historically, if you look at, I looked up the history of the ACC Player of the Year race, which has been an award that's been given out since the 1983-84 season. And there's only been 2 times in the history of the ACC where a player won ACC Player of the Year and their team didn't finish in the top 4 of the standings. That happened in 2017 with Syracuse's Alexis Peterson and 1999 with NC State's Summer Erb. So, you know, if Toby Fournier has a great February, maybe that amps up the ACC Player of the Year race and puts Hannah Hidalgo's candidacy in jeopardy, quite frankly.
Or Zoe Brooks, who was named ACC Player of the Week this week after a meteoric, yes, 1-game week for the Wolfpack, but certainly, as we alluded to, has the ability to go off anytime, as does the entire NC State roster. That'll do it for this week's Starting 5. Folks, it is time for
Pure Beef.
I had to give you the dramatic pause. We love the beat. We love our friends at auditoryfx.com who made that awesome sound effect for us. If you want to make your podcast sound bigger and more professional, all the audio tools you need to take your show to the next level over at auditoryfx.com. Packages start as low as $19.99. We didn't bring her up in this week's Starting 5, but mazel tov to our friends out in Ames, Iowa, who finally got off the schneid. They defeat Cincinnati on the road for their first win in their last 6 games. And the Addie Brown injury and how it's affected Bill Fenley's rotation, we went into depth last week on the issues with the Cyclones and where they stand from a roster construction standpoint heading into the stretch run of conference play. We're not here to talk about that, though, because the beef of the week, and it's kind of surprising that it took until late January for the mainstream media to catch up to something that we have been discussing for months now, which is that Audi Crooks, who Mitch told you back in the fall, you should probably sprinkle a little bit of National Player of the Year money on, that Audi Crooks would be the player that would be the most discussed figure in women's basketball as the calendar gets set to turn to February and March. There was a story in the Washington Post discussing, albeit not with an interview with Crooks or with anyone at Iowa State, about her role and the fact that she is not a traditional body type. She is not a traditional defender. She is a dominant player on offense, and what it means moving forward for women's basketball and Crooks' place in it. Steph Dolson of the Washington Mystics, who at the time she was playing at UConn, Mitch, perhaps an interesting or different body type comparatively to some of her contemporaries. She was interviewed extensively for this story, and she was pretty much the primary source on Audi Crooks' experience because Iowa State did not make the forward available. And, I thought that part was interesting. But respect, because first and foremost, save the Washington Post sports section because they're also on the brink of collapse, which is a story for another time. But point being, I thought it was a well done story. It's timely because I agree that we need to be talking about women's basketball. We need to be talking about college basketball because it's January 26th. But thought it was interesting to look at that player and that team and her role in the landscape of the sport without actually interviewing her, because a lot of folks took issue with that. They took issue with the story, even if they didn't read it. And then it made its rounds on TikTok and a lot of false information was being shared.
Yeah, I think it's a really great story from Candace Buckner, who's been doing this a while and has written a long share of great stories. It is I think, a conversation that is worth having, especially in women's sports. I mean, it's basically the discussion about how, sensitive we need to be when talking about, the bodies of athletes and how to sort of frame the discussion around it. And, I think a lot of people who maybe don't actually watch Audi Crooks play, they just kind of see pictures of her or whatever on Sports Center. They look at her body type as a negative. And what they don't understand is that Candace illustrates in the story with some great quotes and I think insight from Steph Dolson, who has the great Instagram handle of Big Mama Steph. It's that body type that makes her a great player. The way that she can just kind of, move people around in the paint and, push people out of the way with her elbows. And, it makes her really, really difficult to guard. And her body is a weapon on the basketball court. And I think it's a conversation that I think is worth having more in women's basketball. And I think it's a conversation that some people are just uncomfortable having sometimes because we're talking about women. And I think it's, it's one of those things where we wouldn't have a problem talking about men this way, right?
We talk about Zion being fat, but being awesome, at least when he was in college. And the fact that I even just called Zion fat, we can say that, but you wouldn't say that about a female athlete if you're trying to be politically correct.
Yeah. Charles Barkley's another one, round mound of rebound or whatever. Now, 2026, is that nickname a little offensive? Yes, probably. But it's a great story. I would urge anyone who is curious about that or has thoughts about it or it came on their radar via TikTok or something, actually take the time and go click on the Washington Post website and read this story and digest it. And I think it raises some good points and it's a really good conversation worth having. As far as Audi Crooks' Player of the Year candidacy, they got to start winning more games. No
timetable for Addie Brown's return still, by the way.
Right. They are Iowa State. There were more Nielsen ratings released today. And Iowa State is still the number one most watched team in the country, which I think is another thing that we talked about before about just kind of, hey, the Big 12 is on ESPN and ESPN has power. And, so they got to start winning games. She has to start, I think, putting up those big numbers again. These past two games, it's kind of been the Jada Williams show.
40 points and went over Cincinnati.
And 19 against Arizona. So I think right now, like, it's still probably Sarah Strong's race to lose unless Michaela Blake's has a great February, or if Audi Crooks has a great February. So we'll see. But I in terms of the player of the year race, that's, I think, what it's going to come down to. You need Iowa State to keep winning, and you need Audi to keep putting up those big numbers. And, but yeah, go read the story, go check it out. And hope the Washington sports section still exists in a couple weeks.
Yeah.
I said this on Twitter, but if that goes away, I would quickly cancel my subscription. As someone who grew up in the DMV in Maryland, like reading the Washington Post is like one of the things that made me want to be a sports writer, like reading Steve Goff and Barry Svrluga and on and on and on, like all the great sports writers that have come through there. So hope WAPO sports still exists.
To take you all behind the curtain, this week's Beef of the Week was submitted by producer Dimitri because he saw the drama of the TikToks, basically, I don't want to say spreading misinformation about this story, but from individuals who had not clearly read the great piece from Candace Buckner. And so that's where this Beef of the Week started. And it is ending with us imploring you to not only read the story because it's a great profile and we're not friends with her, like we just think she does great work, and also imploring you to encourage the Washington Post to not completely destroy their sports department. And that is now our Beef of the Week.
I will also say, since we're talking about the Washington Post, Kareem Copeland does a great job covering women's college basketball. Covers Maryland really, really closely, but also does some stuff on, the national level as well. Recently wrote a story about basically the epidemic of ACL and knee injuries in women's college basketball. And that is a story worth your time as well.
Go check it out now. That is this week's Beef of the Week. Real quick, before we get to Making Money with Mitch, a sort of kind of main event, because Mitch, we'd be remiss if we didn't mention that while we do not have a new CBA in the WNBA, we do have a schedule for the 2026 season. And in part, the WNBA, through a spokesperson, saying that, quote, releasing the 2026 schedule is a key step as we prepare for the WNBA's 30th season, and it allows teams, partners, broadcasters, and fans to begin the essential planning for the year ahead. Before I run through the highlights of this year's schedule, your thoughts on where we stand, that, hey, we're just going to keep on keeping on business as usual. I personally think they're just going to agree to an extension of the current CBA for the next year, kicking the can further down the road. We will have a season, but then we're going to go through the same song and dance 1 year from now.
Yeah, this is, I guess, part of like that, status quo that they've agreed to and whatever. And so business as usual. Here's the schedule. Is the season going to start on time? TBD. We'll see. I don't know. I saw the schedule release and I was like, why are we doing this now? And basically imploring fans to, hey, go ahead and start making your plans to come to these games and book your hotel rooms and, make sure you're at these games and buy your tickets and all that.
By the way, there actually may not be games, but hey, at least
the game's going to happen. Yeah, I don't know.
Supporting the local Indianapolis economy, it's all good.
Yeah, I didn't love that. But like you said, I do think like we're going to play games and we're going to play a season, and I think it will start on time. I just keep going back to, what Caitlin Clark said at the Team USA camp here in Durham, where she was just like, we have to play games. It's important for us to play games. It's important for us to fight for, what we feel like we deserve. But we have to play games. The fans are ultimately, through the chain reaction, the people who put the money in the players' pockets. And that doesn't happen if you don't play games. So,
and here's the interesting part, Mitch, to your point of, I agree. I think that the season will start on time, but do not forget, there's also going to be a break for the World Cup with regards to that Team USA camp that you covered in Durham. That's going to run from August 31st to September the 16th, or rather the World Cup will be the 4th to the 13th. The WNBA will take a break between August 31st and September 16th. So keep that in mind. The playoffs won't start till September 27th after the season begins May 8th. And so you've also got that block of time that's going to be taken away from the normal calendar. So file that away too. If the season was to have a delayed start, you also then have to account for, well, now you're pushing this schedule even further into the back half of October, further into November. So this argument of you don't want to compete with college football and the NFL, well, that's going to be null and void when all is said and done if the league doesn't start on May 8th, that is as it is currently scheduled to do.
Yeah, World Cup this summer in Berlin, Germany. We also have a World Cup qualifier that the U.S. national team is going to play in March. Now, the U.S. doesn't have to play in this qualifier because they're already qualified for the World Cup, but they're basically playing in it to get, reps and, see how this team is going to shake out. I think the interesting about that qualifier is that Carol Lawson is probably not going to be coaching the team during that because that qualifier takes place in between the ACC tournament and Selection Sunday. And I'm pretty sure Carol Lawson's full focus is going to be on the Duke Blue Devils. So that might be a time where you see some interim coach, maybe that person is
Stephanie White.
Right. Maybe that person is Stephanie White. Maybe it's someone else. I don't know, like maybe it's our buddy Jose Fernandez or I don't know.
Won't he be preparing for an NCAA? Oh, no, that's right. Dallas Wings, idiot. Sorry, I thought he would be cheering on. Thought he'd be cheering on USF. I thought he'd be focused on that or getting the Wings ready for his first season as a head coach.
Yeah, but his star player is probably going to be on this team.
That's true. A little bit more extra time.
I don't know. We'll see. I would assume and bet that Carol Lawson will not be coaching the team in March.
I still can't believe Jose got the job. It warms my heart. But my goodness, I'm glad we live in this world. But I'm like, oh, that's right. We live in this nice world where Jose Fernandez has finally rightfully taken his place as a head coach in the WNBA and being compensated accordingly as well. 44 regular season games per team. Some more highlights for the 2026 WNBA season. That is the same number of games as 2025. The Commissioner's Cup will run from June 1st to the 17th. The title game of the Commissioner's Cup will take place on June 30th. Last year's Commissioner's Cup champion, the Indiana Fever. The Sparks will host the Liberty on June 21st. That is a rematch of the WNBA's inaugural game on the anniversary of the original matchup. Think about that, Mitch. That would mean that once upon a time we started the W season in June. So there is precedence. Heaven forbid that happens, but yikes, we would not want that to happen. And then All-Star Weekend will be July 24th to the 25th. So that's pushed a little bit further out because of the World Cup. And also May 8th start date is similar to last year, but I guess you give yourself a little buffer, I suppose, there, since that would be the logical midpoint of the season.
Yeah. And 2 new teams coming into the league.
No word when expansion draft will be, by the way.
I swear, the longer this goes on, I'm like, they're going to have the freaking expansion draft like the same weekend as the Final Four, and we're all going to be super stupid busy and have to juggle all this stuff, and I don't even want to think about it. But
as long as they don't put it on Baller TV or Flow Hoops,
no.
Okay, yeah, it'll be on the Mouse. Shout out to the Mouse. It's all good. It's all good. All right, that's your sort of kind of main event this week. Again, the WNBA season, as of now, slated to begin on May 8th. It is time for this week's 3-pack of picks with one Mitch Northam of USA Today. For the first time this season, folks, Mitch has gone winless in last week's 3-pack. But some positive storylines. The reason you went 0-3, Iowa with the upset win over the Terps on the road. The Greenbrier 5 continues to be in vogue. West Virginia, 2 big wins last week, even though they're not exactly the most aesthetically pleasing outfit on offense. And then, South Carolina got their mojo back as they steamrolled Vanderbilt by 30. Who is in this week's Making Money with Mitch?
Okay, we're starting off with a big mid-major matchup that I'm going to go to Wednesday night. George Mason is visiting Davidson. George Mason is undefeated in A10 play. Their game against Richmond on Sunday was actually postponed because of the winter storm. Davidson in the top 3 or 4 of the standings, I believe. So it's a big game for both teams. This is Wednesday night, 7 p.m. Eastern on ESPN. Plus, I'm taking Davidson in the points, -4.5. I think the Wildcats will get this one over on Mason at home.
I am so happy that that game, by the way, was actually rescheduled because did you see the original plan for that
Yeah, they
game?
weren't going to have any fans in there.
It was going to be COVID times. Like I was talking with some of the visiting coaches here in Jacksonville this week from Eastern Kentucky and Bellarmine about it, and they were like, "It's a COVID game."
Right.
But I guess the radio crews were going to be allowed in because they're self-operating, but they weren't going to let the full ESPN Plus streaming video operation in, which is pretty funny.
Well, that's what they had. The UNC Syracuse game that went to overtime. There was no ACC network crew there, so they put the game on the ACC network extra, but it was one camera just panning the whole court, and there was no broadcast crew. It was just court sound, so you could have synced it up with Matt Krause's radio call for UNC, but. Yeah, it was kind of weird because I tuned into a little bit of that to see it go into overtime and stuff. But yeah, strange times from the winter storm.
I saw there's another storm coming up the East Coast this weekend. Great. Hopefully everyone stays safe and hopefully it does not affect our basketball. Who's number 2 in this week's? Oh, Mitch. Oh, you have them covering. Okay. Mm-hmm. I was going to say the Hawkeyes failed you last week. You're going to go against them again?
No. So this is Thursday, 9 p.m. Eastern on Peacock. Iowa is at USC. The line that I'm seeing right now is USC favored by 2.5 points. I think the Hawkeyes go in there and get the job done, so I'm going to take them to cover.
I think that is the desert, Vegas, the sports books simply thinking there is no way Iowa can get to 10-0 in the Big Ten standings. I disagree, even though I also think USC's got to get off the schneid and actually put a team away at some point in time. Maybe they can do that at the Galen Center on Thursday. And your final pick this week is, little Red River. Let's go. Yes, Red River. Let's go.
That's right. This is Sunday, 3 p.m. Eastern on ABC. This is also the first game of the season where we will have a ESPN College game day at Oklahoma at Texas. The line I'm seeing right now is Texas favored by 10.5 points. I will take the Sooners and Aaliyah Chavez to cover.
Unless, of course, she shoots under 32%. File that one away, folks. File that away. To recap Mitch's picks this week, he has Davidson a 4.5 point favorite at home against George Mason Wednesday night. He has Iowa covering a 2.5 point spread as the underdog on the road at USC on Thursday. And finally, Oklahoma covering a 10.5 point spread at Texas Sunday, ABC 3 p.m. And they will also receive the college game day treatment. It is time for last call. We're going to have to go fast with these, Mitch, because there's a lot of ground we got to make up, some storylines we may have missed. First and foremost, I know this was one of your favorite storylines from the week. I know Ovius and Giulio loved it. Will Wade, Kara Lawson on the same charter because of the snowstorm to Pittsburgh. What could possibly go wrong? Mitch, your worlds collide. Tell us more. What went down?
Yeah, basically, because of the winter storm, everybody was kind of consolidating flights, and the Duke women and the NC State men were both playing at Pittsburgh on Saturday in a doubleheader. So they chartered the same flight together. And yes, I would love to know if Kara Lawson and Will Wade spoke to each other and what they talked about, and what kind of things they have in common. I would love to know. The UNC men and NC State women also considered doing this because they both played at Virginia on Saturday, but they just took buses instead.
Imagine if Oricon was still at NC State and hadn't gone back to McNeese. Like, can you imagine Kara Lawson with the boombox on that charter? Like, she would have lost her mind. She'd be like, "What are we doing? Like, who's this kid? Who is this young man with the boombox walking around? He's walking up and down the aisles. We got to keep it moving."
She would not have entertained that.
UCLA, we alluded to them earlier. They are also 9-0 in the Big Ten standings, and yet here we are 54 minutes into the program just bringing them up. I am sure that Corey Close will take issue with us, as she will with the rest of the women's basketball media, because we apparently aren't going to be talking about UCLA enough.
I would point out about UCLA, they have 3 players basically flirting with 50, 40, 90 seasons. Gabriela Jaquez is 58% from the floor, 47 from 3, 88 from the free throw line. Gianna Neepkins, 52% from the floor, 47 from 3, 95 from the free throw line. And Kiki Rice, 49% from the floor, 39 from 3, 90 from the free throw line. So that is pretty impressive.
I can't wait for Gabby Jaquez, much like her brother Jaime, to somehow sneak into the back half of the first round. Everyone's going to go, what the heck? Like, why? And then you show numbers like that. You show the efficiency numbers, what she's able to do on defense. And you're like, oh, okay. Yeah, that clears. And then when she makes the all W rookie team, you're just going to look back and be like, oh, okay, I get it. Draft good basketball players.
That's right.
Syracuse has a player who has now won how many ACC Rookie of the Year honors, Mitch?
I don't know. It's been too many to count.
I feel like I vote for her every single week. Tell us about Uche.
Uche is Syracuse's freshman center, her 6th ACC Rookie of the Week this week. I believe Tanaya Latson has the record. I can't remember how many, but the year that Tanaya Latson was a rookie, it was literally like every single week it was Tanaya Latson. And she ended up winning National Freshman of the Year that season, the Tamika Catchings Award from the USBWA. Uche is averaging 14.5 points and 9.1 rebounds per game. She is from Nigeria. She is basically the engine making Syracuse go, and the reason why they are in the mix to make the NCAA tournament this year. She is most definitely going to win ACC Rookie of the Year.
The Orange are 16-4, 6-3 in ACC play. Don't call it a comeback for the folks in Central New York. We also have managed to get 56 minutes into the program, Mitch, and not discuss the lone undefeated team left in the sports. That is the number 1 ranked Connecticut Huskies. Sarah Strong is the 3rd fastest Husky in program history to reach the 1,000-point plateau. She does it in 59 games, trailing only her former teammate in Paige Beckers and the legend Maya Moore, who did it in 55. But you also had some interesting notes when it came to those Nielsen ratings and Gino Auriemma's squad.
Yeah, they weren't in the top 10, which I thought was wild. But they've only played on ESPN once this year. They've either been on Fox or FS1 or the True TV TNT package. And, you know, like I said, again, that's the power of ESPN. But also, like, do people really want to watch UConn beat insert Big East team by 40 or 50 points? Probably not. I do think a lot of people are going to tune in on Sunday when they host Tennessee at noon on Fox. That's basically UConn's last big test of the year before we get into the NCAA tournament.
Great segue, Mitch, because I wanted to talk a little more about Killa Kim, because I don't think they're getting enough respect for what they've been able to do on Old Rocky Top. They are 6-0 in SEC play, the only undefeated team in the Southeastern Conference. 14-3. And maybe it's because we remember that season opening day loss to NC State. Maybe it's because we remember the marathon with Louisville or the drubbing at the hands of UCLA in Westwood. But this team has won 6 straight games, and they may be playing as well as any team in the conference. So shout out to Killa Kim, man.
Yeah, I think Tennessee's got it together. They're looking good in SEC play. Beating Kentucky was a big win for them. I had a couple people, you know, I was at the Iowa-Maryland game, so I didn't watch Kentucky-Tennessee. But I had a couple people just kind of texting me about it, and I looked at the score, and I was like, oh, that game is being played at Kentucky's pace, because it's pretty low scoring in terms of a Tennessee game. But Tennessee comes out at the end and gets it done. So good for them. Good for Killa Kim. Also had an impressive win over Alabama a couple weeks ago. They're going to play Mississippi State coming up. Their game against Ole Miss got postponed. Interesting thing about the Ole Miss game, I don't know when they're going to be able to play that, because Tennessee does not have an open date in SEC play because they're playing UConn in what would have been their baked-in SEC open date. And so I don't know. Like, we might have a situation where the SEC tries to squeeze that in and basically make those two teams play like 3 games in the span of a week or something like that. But yeah, so I don't know if we'll see Ole Miss Tennessee, but Tennessee's got a stretch coming up after UConn where they're going to play Georgia, at South Carolina. Then they're going to play Missouri. That's a dub. Then they're going to play Texas. Then they're going to play Texas A&M. That's a dub. Then Oklahoma, LSU, Vanderbilt. So the back half of their SEC schedule is pretty tough. So we'll see how that pans out.
Lady Vols 15th in this week's AP poll. There are 10 teams in the 25-team poll this week, and that includes a team you just referenced, Mitch, a team that we thought their head coach could be on the hot seat. Here we are. We live in a world in which Georgia's men's and women's basketball teams have been ranked in 2025, 2026. The Dogs clocking in at number 23 this week.
Yeah, Georgia's going to go to the NCAA tournament. Probably, like they are, unless they just collapse in February. I mean, they have 2 quad 1 wins now. They're 32nd in net, 24th in WAB. I do still think it was fair for us to criticize and question their legitimacy, considering that their non-conference net strength of schedule was 337th in the country. I mean, like they did not play anyone in November and December, but they're proving in an SEC play. Getting those 2 quad 1 wins is really good for their resume. And yeah, I don't think we have to worry about KAH on the hot seat. I think she's coached her way off of that for sure.
Listen, KAH is just looking across the aisle at Mike White, and he's playing this soft non-con, and she's like, whatever. Like, he's got job security for life. I might as well just follow his suit. So
it's the Kim Mulkey recipe.
Oh boy. We're not even going to open that can of worms. Can't believe we've gotten an hour in with one more shout out to go. And we haven't referenced the other Kim in the SEC, but instead we will close with this. Dominique Malonga, an emphatic dunk at Unrivaled earlier this weekend. Mitch, your thoughts on not just Malonga, but some of the returns so far we've seen from Unrivaled in season 2.
Yeah, the Dominique Malonga dunk was awesome. The reaction I loved was Rakia Jackson's, who fed her that assist on that. She just immediately went into the surrender Cobra because she just couldn't believe it. But that was awesome. That was really cool to see. What is worrisome, I think, if you're someone invested in Unrivaled, is the ratings are pretty down this year across the board. And I don't know if that's a fatigue thing of, hey, last year it was new and we wanted to see and we wanted to tune in. And then you go to this year and
they expanded how many days they play too this year, and they expanded the number of teams.
Right. There's more games, there's more teams. And there is still some star power with Paige Beckers and Brianna Stewart and, the like. But you don't have an Afisa Collier. You still don't have a Caitlin Clark in this league. And I wonder if kind of like the WNBA labor talks kind of hanging over this, like if that's impacted the viewership in some way. I don't know. Interesting year 2 for Unrivaled so far. I
am curious if the ratings continue to maybe not be where they were a season ago. And depending on what exactly shakes out this W season, I mean, do you have to make a Godfather offer and try to get CC to play? Because that's one way to instantly shoot those ratings all the way to the moon.
I bet that Turner Sports and the folks at TNT would love to see it.
Yes. So, Caitlin, if you're listening, maybe consider it, possibly. But she's got to worry about Team USA. That's her focus, besides the Indiana Fever.
Got to worry about her golf game.
26. Right? Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm still waiting for her to come down and play Sawgrass. We got until second week of February. So, Caitlin, if you're listening, just remember that we've only got a couple of weeks before then. You got a month and a half. You can't be playing on the island green. Mitch, what assignments do you have coming up this week for USA Today?
I will have a notebook out that you can read. I will have the weekly bracketology bracket watch. I do have a little Aaliyah Chavez story coming out. I'm going to go to George Mason Davidson. And next week we're going to start some softball coverage. So check that out as well.
I like that. I have my first lacrosse game at JU for the nationally ranked JU women's lacrosse team. That's coming up next Saturday.
Yeah,
so
they're good. They're good at women's lacrosse, right?
They are indeed. Crossover season, it's here. And we have a little bit later of a non-con to start. Last year, starting with number 3 Michigan. And then you had a Navy team that was receiving votes. You had a Richmond team that was receiving votes right out the gate. Probably don't schedule that way again, even though I respect the northern teams. They can't wait to come on down to where it was 60 and sunny today. All right, with that, I better get out of here. We better get out of here. We appreciate you tuning in for this week's The Women's Basketball Podcast. He's Mitch, I'm Mia. Until next week, saying we'll catch you later.
Deuces.